Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Eagan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlawn Next and based in Eagan. Through Westlawn Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. Access to Democracy returns. Alan Miller is your host, as usual. And we have an elusive guest today. We've been trying to get him here for a long time. And he literally is a household word in the world of dermatology. Dr. Charles Crutchfield, who has his office right here in Eagan and is one of the nation's leading dermatologists. So I'm glad we finally got you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for those kind words.
They're all true. And I have so much material in terms of media that you have done, articles by you and about you, books that you have written, things like that. It's an amazing, really, portfolio for one person.
Well, it reminds me that I'm getting older. It takes time to acquire those things.
You're only a kid, trust me. Now, what led you into dermatology?
I think one of the things that led me into medicine, and I always say that I stand on the shoulders of giants. Both my parents were physicians. And in fact, they both graduated from the University of Minnesota Medical School in 1963. At the time, my father went into obstetrics and gynecology, and he was the first African-American OBGYN physician in the Twin Cities. And my mother at the time was the first African-American woman to graduate from the University of Minnesota Medical School, but she says even more importantly, she was also the youngest at the time to graduate. She finished medical school at age 22. And so she actually started practicing.
That's unbelievable in today's world.
In today's world, and thinking that it was really pre-strong civil rights movement. That came on in the mid-60s, 65, 66. This is 1962. She was an attending physician at St. Mary's Hospital and had a private practice in Roseville with several other physicians at the time.
That must have opened a few eyes.
Yeah, it did. And it's very interesting because back in the day, you didn't do a residency, you would join a small group, and it was almost like an apprenticeship. And so if you had difficult cases, you'd talk to your partners about it, and they'd give you advice. And over a few years, it was kind of like a residency. But at age 22, she'd walk into the hospital room, and she said oftentimes the patients would say, "Nurse, when will the doctor be here?" And she said, "You're looking at her."
And we have come a ways since then, but we still have a long way to go in that regard.
Yeah. And so my mother tells me she got pregnant with me her first year of med school. And so I was 3 years old when they graduated, but I remember as a child spending a lot of time with their classmates and their friends, and so that planted the seed of medicine. Ever since I was a small child, I always thought medicine might be my career.
And it became your career. Take us through college and med school and all.
Well, I grew up in the Twin Cities. I was actually born in Minneapolis. And I went to Field Elementary School, and my grandmother, Mary Jackson Ellis, was an elementary school teacher. She was the first African-American teacher in the public school system in Minneapolis. They hired her sight unseen from West Virginia. And when she showed up, they didn't realize she was African-American. So the school board had some problems, said, we're going to table this for a while and put this on the back burner. And at the time, the mayor of Minneapolis was a guy named Hubert Humphrey. And he found out about it. He went to battle. He went to the school board and told them that they're either going to hire her or they're going to have some problems. So he was instrumental.
A leader in the civil rights movement, as a matter of fact.
And so he was instrumental in getting her hired in the school system. But anyway, my father was drafted into the military for the Vietnam War, and we were stationed in Spokane, Washington, at Fairchild Air Force Base. And my father was the base obstetrician gynecologist, and so because it was an Air Force base, most of the guys there were pilots, and most of their wives were at home, and many had kids. So he delivered a lot of kids on the base. But we moved here back to the Twin Cities in 1969, and we moved into the Highland Park area of St. Paul. And at the time, we were the first African American family to move into that area, and they actually circulated a petition to keep us out of the neighborhood. I don't think it had any teeth, but still it was something that would be kind of intimidating. And I remember when we first moved in, my father said, one of the neighbors came and told me about this petition, and the neighbor said, I didn't sign it, but let me show you the houses that did, that one and that one and that one. So it was very interesting. But I grew up in Highland Park. I went to Highland Park Junior High School, and I went to Minnehaha Academy for high school. I went to a local college, Carleton College in Northfield. I teach there now as an undergraduate, and then I went to the Mayo Clinic for graduate school and also for medical school. And I had a one-year diversion. I went to Gunderson Clinic in La Crosse. So I'm still a Vikings fan. I didn't let all the Packers fans convert me, but I had a great year there. And I did my internship. And traditionally, an internship is considered your first year out of medical school, you're an intern. And I did that, and then I applied to residency at the University of Minnesota in dermatology, and I came on back to the University of Minnesota, and then I set up practice in St. Paul with Dr. Harold Ravitz and his group, and I was with them for several years, and then I started my own group.
And of course, you moved to Eagan.
To Eagan. Although I was with the Ravitz group, we actually opened an office in Eagan. So that's why I kind of liked Eagan. When I was in medical school or in residency, I had a townhome in Eagan. It was an easy commute, and so I fell in love with Eagan. It's wonderful.
Wise choice. It's a great city.
Love Eagan.
As a matter of fact, it once again, for the 5th straight year, has been picked as one of the top, I think they're 12th in the country, one of the top places to live. The only city of its size that's been picked 5 consecutive, over a decade, by, I think it's, I don't know, one of the financial magazines as one of the best places to live in the country. And I happen to live here. I happen to think it is one of the best places to
no,
live
I
in
love
the
Eagan. In
country.
fact, we're looking at schools for my daughter. She's a freshman in high school. And like I said, I went to Minnehaha. My brother went to Breck. My other brother went to St. Paul Central. My other cousin went to SPA. My sister went. We looked at all those schools for my daughter, and you know what she picked? Eagan.
196.
196. She's
Yeah, it's a great school
She's a
district.
Wildcat, so she's a freshman at Eagan High School, and she had her
for
choice
her.
of schools, and she picked Eagan.
Good. You have a very interesting practice, which I can speak of firsthand, because other practices have half a dozen doctors around. You are usually trailed by a resident or an intern, but you are the doctor there. And it's amazing. You must have 30 to 40 employees. You have people in many different rooms, but when it comes to the treatment, they see Dr. Charles.
Yes. And you know, that's my philosophy. It's when I was a medical student, a lot of the surgeons, they loved to operate. And they didn't like to do notes, and they didn't like to do exams and physicals too much. And so their note in the chart would be AF as in Frank, VSS, and it stood for afebrile, vital signs stable. And that was their note. So the hospital said, you know, we need to have a little bit more documentation. We know you guys like to operate, but so they hired physician assistants to assist the surgeons, and they would, you know, do their hospital rounds and hospital charting and pre-surgical physical examinations and post-surgical examinations. And so, you know, a lot of people use physician extenders and physician assistants, and I think that certainly has its role and it's got its place, and I respect them. But the philosophy I had for my practice is I want to see every patient that comes in. And so I have comments from my colleagues when they refer a patient into our practice or our clinic, they know that I'm always going to see them and they're going to get a consultation letter from me.
It must make a long day, though, for you.
It's a fun day. I love what
Because,
I'm so
I mean,
lucky. I'm
you
so
walk
fortunate.
into your waiting room, there could be 12 or 15 people there, but it moves so rapidly.
Yeah, and we've got some other things going. Some patients will come in for laboratory visits, some will come in for the spa visits. But, you know, for me, like I said, I feel so fortunate and so lucky. I love doing what I do, and I've got the ability to know certain things about the skin and to help people when they have skin problems. So for me, it's a fun day.
Now, you say certain things about the skin. There are also a lot of people who go to dermatologists for cosmetic reasons, and that's become a very big part of the practice. How do you find what portion of your practice is really dermatological and how much is cosmetic?
Yeah. And it's one of those things you have to draw the line because it's really two different businesses, the medical side versus the aesthetic side. And so in my practice, about 18 to 20% is aesthetic, and about 80 to 85% is medical. And you just have to set up those slots for your appointments in that way. I know that we were contacted several years ago. There's a big kind of catchy news story going on around saying, you know, if patients call the medical office and they need Botox, they can get in a week. And if they have a changing mole, they're worried about skin cancer, it might take a month. So they did a big expose on that. So they contacted us, but the thing with us is you can't start giving away your aesthetic appointments to medical patients, otherwise that part of your practice dies. There's no more appointments there. So we were fortunate. We contacted our dermatopathologist and we realized that personally we had diagnosed close to 4,000 skin cancers in the last 10 years. So we've got a great system. We work with primary care doctors. If there's a concern about a change of mole, we see them that day. I'll stay late. We'll see them the next morning. We always get them and it's not a problem.
That's really important.
Yeah, it
And
is.
it's important for people to know that. And it's one of the reasons that you have so many personnel working with you.
Yeah, and I use the staff as true support staff for me, as true physician assistants. My staff will help me with doing the charting like a scribe, which is really popular in emergency rooms right now. If you ever go to an ER, the doctors are there doing the doctoring things, and they have a support staff,
Yeah.
you know, doing all the charting things like that, which is the way it should be. I really think it's a much better system.
It's much better for the doctors and for the patients, really.
For everyone.
both,
In
yeah.
fact, the doctors told me the scribes do a better job charting, and they can do a better job doctoring. So it's win-win-win all the way around.
With that said, you also have created some of your own solutions to handle different medical problems.
Yeah.
You know, most people will get, and I'm sure you do, give prescriptions for some things, but other things, they get Dr. Crutchfield's solutions.
Right. I think this harkens back to the time, you know, I also have a master's degree in molecular biology, so I spent a lot of time, a lot of years in the lab mixing things, but I got so frustrated because patients I'd write a prescription and they'd come back mad at me and they'd say, you know, I went to pick it up, that tube was $400, that was $800, and I thought, well, you know, you can compound it into quality vehicles and get the same medicines, and it costs $10 or $15. So we just do that at our cost and give it to the patients so they don't get stuck with a large medical bill. So a lot of the generic medications we can provide right on site. Plus, patients say they love it because, number one, it's less than a copay. Number two, they don't have to drive somewhere and park and wait a half an hour as they're rummaging through a store looking at all the other things they tempt you to buy. They can just get it and go home and use it. So patients have really, really loved it. And I think it's good, too, because it's bringing down healthcare costs. You're not spending a lot of money on prescriptions that are not necessary.
Yeah, that's an amazing thing that you said. We give it to them at our cost.
Yes.
You know, you don't find that very often in the medical practice.
No, and there, you know, of course, our accountants and other people put pressure on us to raise the price. But I said, as long as we can cover our manufacturing costs and give the patients a good deal, that's great. We're happy with that.
Now, I just read something recently. It says there is a shortage of dermatologists in this country, and in the state for that matter. Why would that be?
Well, and it's been that way ever since I was in residency. But I think it's because only 1% of all practicing physicians are dermatologists. But the Mayo Clinic just did a survey. The number one reason for medical visit, skin issues. And when I see primary care physicians, and I have a practice where we accept residents all the time. Like you said, there's always somebody with me. I always have a medical student or resident or even a couple with me. And a lot of the residents will tell me that half their encounters it's an, oh, by the way, this mole has changed. I have this spot that itches. I've got this little red thing. What is it? So there's always a dermatologic encounter. But the problem is training positions. There are only so many training slots, and so what's happening is the dermatologists are retiring slightly faster than they're training, so you're going to get a net loss. And so in order to say, well, we need more dermatologists, that's a big deal because you've got to go to all the training facilities and universities and say we need additional funding for training positions for residents and then start revving that up. So it takes a while and it's very expensive.
Now, you were scheduled to come here once before, and at the last minute you had to cancel because there was a problem with the twins. Somebody had a dermatological problem, and you had to fly to Florida, to Fort Myers in spring training.
I did.
And I know you can't talk about patients.
I can't talk about patients, but so the people I say, well, what in the world could be a dermatologic emergency for anyone, for any reason?
Well, John Steebs, who has been here several times
sure.
and happened to have been scheduled that day,
Yeah.
also, John said, what kind of medical emergencies do dermatologists have?
That's funny. And I just ran into John last week, and I said, John, you know what it is. Anyway, so there's and I can talk in general. there's a condition called blepharospasm, and everybody's had it. It's where your eyes kind of twitch, kind of like your diaphragm when you have hiccups. We've ever had your eye twitch?
Sure.
And to you, it looks like the world is having an earthquake. But when people look at you, they can barely see it. The problem is it gets much worse when you're under stress or if you strain down. So now imagine yourself a batter, and you've got somebody throwing a baseball at your head at 90 plus miles an hour, and your eyes start twitching like that. That's an emergency. I mean,
That is an
you can't
emergency.
play. You're terrified, and you're bailing out, and you can't swing. And it was so funny because they called me down.
Did the Twins suffer from that all season long this year?
No, I have to say I don't think that was it. But with that, you can actually relax the muscles around the eyes with an injection so the players can play. But it's very tricky because if you relax the wrong muscles, all of a sudden you get eyelid droop and then they can't see. So it's very tricky. So they wanted somebody with experience who had done it, treated other players to come down and help because they had a couple players who were having some real problems. So, but they did great and everything responded well.
But you handle just about every professional sports team in Minnesota.
Yeah, we treat players from all the sports teams.
I don't know how you have managed that, but you know that speaks to your reputation in and of itself.
Yeah, I think it's just because we've been around so long, and we've treated a lot of the players and some of the staff and some of the trainers. And when you treat the trainers, they talk to each other and said, "Hey, we had a nice result here," and so it kind of built over time.
And what's in the future, dermatology-wise? What do you see coming down the road?
Well, one of the things that as physicians that we're really trying to be patient advocates is we're trying to help avoid a lot of the narrowed networks. You know, this thing about I want to see my own physician, or you be able to keep your own doctor. Well, what's happening now, there's a thing called economic credentialing that patients don't really know about, but a lot of the insurance plans, they have a cost per encounter. They know exactly to the penny what it costs for any patient to see a doctor, because some doctors will not treat very aggressively, some will treat overly aggressively and use a lot of medicines that can be very costly. And so what they're doing is they're looking at the lists of doctors in their plans and they're saying who's the most expensive, and they can certainly drop them from the plans, and that's called a narrow network. But we're really advocates saying patients should be able to choose their own physician. You should be able to choose your own doctor. You should be able to choose the doctor who treat your parents. You should be able to choose the doctor that treats your children. So we're fighting against that. We're saying if you're a validly licensed physician in Minnesota and you're an insurance company, take our doctors. Take the Minnesota doctors. So that's one thing we're fighting for. The other thing we're fighting for is appropriate training in this aesthetic medicine, as you talked about. It's the Wild West out there. And you can go somewhere, you don't know if you're getting a medical assistant injecting around your eyes who took a course down in Las Vegas and they shot up tomatoes last week and now they're treating you, or is it somebody who's a really serious board-certified physician with years of experience? So we're trying to educate the public to make your choices wise. You get what you pay for.
And we hope so, anyway.
Yeah.
It's so you've treated all these athletes, you've treated all these different dermatological conditions, and you also have become a really good marketer. You know, I have here, for instance, Minneapolis St. Paul magazine. Every month there's a different page with a different dermatology issue. I think yesterday it was the one I got was acne, but it's right, psoriasis and so on. Now you're doing that at cost to yourself, I take it.
One of the things that we tried to do was we wanted to do a syndicated column on healthcare issues and skincare issues, and that didn't work as well. So we thought, well, let's go ahead and use this as an advertorial piece to put out the same information, and we'll control the quality of the content. I'm a firm believer if you let people know that you're an expert in anything, when they need your help, they'll come to you. And so that's kind of how we base it.
But it's also an expensive way of letting people know that you're an expert. I mean, you're bearing the cost of that.
Yeah, we are. We look at it more of an investment, but sometimes, you know, we come out even, we wash even, but nevertheless it still gets out there because maybe you read the article about acne, and you might not have acne, but a few years from now, maybe your granddaughter has acne, and you say, you know what, I know where you should go. I know somebody that's interested in treating that.
And that's really interesting. I've also read, in preparation for this interview, so many articles about you in magazines, media-wise, otherwise, And I've seen you've been picked as one of the top 100 dermatologists in the country, and you're always picked as one of the top, if not the top, here in Minnesota. So obviously the word is out.
Yeah, you know, I think we're fortunate, and I try to communicate with my colleagues too, that if you have a tough patient with a skincare issue, I'll see them right away. And so a lot of those surveys, I'll call my colleagues and say, who do you send to? And we're always willing to accept those. I think the other thing that I learned early on, I took a marketing course before I opened my practice.
Probably a wise thing that doctors should all do.
I did, and it was, you know, knock on wood, I'm glad I did. But one of the things they told us in the course, they said with the media, oftentimes they're running on deadlines all the time. And so, and most physicians are busy too. And so you call and say, well, we're doing a story on skin cancer and sunscreens. Can you talk to us? Yeah, I can. I've got an opening in 3 weeks. You know what? Click. They go on to the next one. So they said, if you get a call, be available or make yourself available. And so for the first couple years in practice, every call I got, I made myself available. And all of a sudden, the word kind of gets out, hey, this guy likes to work with the media. He gives good information. He's got good credential, good training. And it kind of snowballed from there.
And it has to come back to you patient-wise also, because your name is out there and people react.
Yeah, and I think it's nice that way. So once again, it's kind of a win-win situation. You're helping put out information to the public, but also you're building public trust because they realize you know what you're talking about and you're interested in helping that problem.
There's some things you don't do in terms of dermatology. For instance, operations, you don't do.
I don't do
apparently.
any major operations. There's a thing called Mohs surgery, and that's usually for skin cancer on the face. And I've got great colleagues that I refer to. Smaller procedures, absolutely, and diagnosis and biopsy, sure. But
See also my large nose.
it looks lovely. So yeah, and so I do refer to my colleagues for those cases. But most everything else we take care of.
Now, family-wise, what is the Crutchfield family made of?
Oh man, somebody asked me what's my favorite thing. It's my kids, and I love my family to death. I've got 3 kids. And once again, the oldest one who's a freshman in college or freshman in high school, going to Eagan. She's a Wildcat. She's 14. I've got a son, Charles Edward Crutchfield IV. He's 11 years old, and bless his heart, he got to know his grandfather, or his great-grandfather, Charles Edward Crutchfield I, who was a World War II veteran. He was on the beaches of Normandy, and he just passed away this past fall at age 99. And so last summer, I said, Grandfather, we went down to visit him. He's from Alabama. I said, Grandfather, you gonna go to 100? And he looked at me and said, I'm gonna try. I said, well, technically, Grandfather, you're entering your 100th year today as you cross over. He goes, yeah, you're right about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, my mother made it to 99 also, so I hope I have some of those good genes.
Yeah. So anyway, so he's 11, and then I've got a youngest daughter, Ariana, and she's 8, and she's in 2nd grade. Charles is in the 5th grade. So they're all in the Eagan schools. They go to Deerwood Elementary in Eagan.
And how many are becoming dermatologists?
I don't know. My daughter says she wants to be a geologist, so we'll have to see what happens. So, and then my wife is, she's a native Detroit person, but I met her in Rochester, Minnesota when she was working for IBM as a summer student, and I was at medical school at the Mayo Clinic, and we met downtown Rochester when she was waiting for a bus. I struck up a conversation and we hit it off. And so we've been together now 23 years.
Good for you. Question, what is cool sculpting? I read about cool sculpting in terms of dermatologists.
Yeah.
And what is it?
You know, some of the ancillary aesthetic procedures we do a lot of, I also do a lot of laser treatments, both for medical treatments and for aesthetic treatments. But cool sculpting reminds me when I was a graduate student in the Mayo Clinic, my mentor there was Dr. Michael Getz. And he came in one day, he said, Charles, let me tell you something. I said, what is it, Dr. Getz? He said, every once in a while in life, people stumble over the truth. Unfortunately, most of us pick ourselves up and keep on going. And I'll never forget that because I read an article in the New England Journal of Medicine about these kids that eat popsicles. And have you ever seen the popsicles with the wooden sticks? You can break them in half and share a half. Well, the tip is real smooth, but there's some kids that get addicted to these things. They eat them all the time, and so they're always in their mouth, and that round tip is pressing against their cheek. And over the summer, after eating dozens, if not hundreds of these popsicles, the fat in their cheek would melt away, it would dissolve the fat, and they have these dimples in their cheek. And they called it cold cryolipolysis. In the article, I thought, that is just weird. You can put a popsicle and melts away the fat. I picked myself and kept on going, but somebody read the article and they said, whoa, if we could make a machine and put it on tummies and melt away the fat or love handles, And that's what happens. So it's a procedure you can use that chills down the fat to just above freezing for an hour or two, and you do a few sessions, and it actually causes the fat to melt away.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so anyway, that's that story. It's a true story.
And as time is running rapidly here, you have a book about Charles hit a home run or something like that?
Yeah, it's
What is that book?
It's a book that we're going to be marketing for the Twins Community Fund, and the Community Fund is really instrumental in building baseball stadiums.
Yeah, I'm very involved in it, as a matter of fact.
Beautiful.
It's,
And so we wrote a book, and it talks about sun protection. We talked about, we wanted to have it in kids, because kids playing outside, playing baseball all summer, need to be sun smart and sun protective. So the story is about my son, whose father's a dermatologist, is telling all the kids on the baseball team, be sun smart, sun safe, and use your sunscreen. So it's called Little Charles Hits Home Run. We're making a variation of it called TC Bear for the Twins, and Little Charles Hits a Home Run. So we're going to hopefully get that going next year with the Twins and use that as a fundraiser for the Twins Community Fund.
and a very important area that you just touched on also is the amount of skin cancer that's increasing rapidly because of exposure to the sun and the fact that we don't have as many layers in the atmosphere to protect us anymore.
That's right. We're seeing more and more, and also the Minnesota Dermatologic Society and the Minnesota Medical Association were instrumental in passing some laws restricting tanning booths for people under the age of 18, which is really good because a lot of times you don't realize the damage you're causing. So it's important to sun protect.
Yeah, some of our legislators who have been here were very involved
In that, yes,
in
with the AMA.
getting kids out of those tanning salons.
Yeah, and that's a good thing.
You look great at the time, but
when
down the road.
That's right. And it's one of those things, when you're young, you know, you think it'll come later, but you're right. Down the road, you pay the price 20 years later.
And incredible. And your practice is so unique that you have to see it to really appreciate it.
Yeah.
And
I think the main thing too with our practice, the reason it's going so well is we've got great staff that work there, all the way from the reception staff to the nursing staff to the administrative side. They all do such a wonderful job, and without everybody firing on all 8 cylinders, it wouldn't work. And they fire on all 8, and they do a great job. And I'm lucky once again to have such great staff.
well, they're lucky to have such a great boss. And when it comes to signing the checks, that must be a long day.
Some days it is, yes it is.
We've been talking with Dr. Charles Crutchfield, a leading dermatologist, not only here in Eagan, not only here in Minnesota, but recognized nationally. So many articles about you, or which you participated in, and media, and an author. So what's next?
You know, we're looking at doing some teledermatology, and so reaching out to different communities and helping out a long distance for communities that are underserved. We're also looking at developing some new apps for physicians in rural areas and other healthcare providers that will enable them to help make dermatologic diagnoses. We're working on that right now too.
And that could work overseas as well.
Everywhere. So,
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we finally got you here. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's been my pleasure
And,
to be here today.
I thank you so much. And
Thank you.
come back and talk to us again.
I'd love to.
Okay.
Okay.